Mabel's diner wasn't much to look at from the outside. A plain brick building on Main Street, its paint peeling just a little around the edges, with a chipped sign that creaked in the breeze. But step inside, and you were hit by an invisible wave of warmth, the mingled scents of brewing coffee, sizzling bacon, and maple syrup, a comforting embrace that promised a good day ahead. This wasn't a fancy place. It was a place where names were remembered, where gossip was exchanged over endless refills, and where the pancakes were as fluffy as a cloud. At the heart of this warmth was Maggie O'Malley. She wasn't the owner. That was Old Man Peterson, a man whose face seemed permanently set in a grumpy scowl, but whose heart everyone knew was soft as a fresh biscuit. No, Maggie was the cook, and in Mabel's diner, the cook was the soul. Maggie was in her mid-30s with capable hands that moved with a quiet precision. Her dark hair was usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her apron, though often speckled with flour or a stray drop of gravy, was always clean. She wasn't one for small talk, not like some of the waitresses. Maggie spoke through her food. Every omelet she flipped, every steak she grilled, every pie she baked, was a carefully crafted message of care and comfort. Her day started before the sun even thought about stretching. The alarm clock would jolt her awake at 4 a.m. a time, when the rest of Harmony Creek was still deep in slumber. She'd slip out of her small apartment above the diner, the stairs groaning underfoot, and head straight for the kitchen. The vast empty space would slowly come alive under her touch. Lights would flicker and the massive griddle would hum to life, and the first rich aroma of coffee would begin to steep, wrapping itself around the quiet diner like a promise. Maggie didn't mind the solitude of those early hours. It was when she felt most at peace, most connected to her craft. She'd meticulously prepare the ingredients, chopping onions and peppers for the morning's hash, kneading dough for fresh bread, slicing mountains of potatoes for the home fries. Her grandmother, a woman whose hands had been as skilled as Maggie's, used to say that cooking wasn't just about following a recipe. It was about pouring a piece of your heart into every dish. Maggie took that wisdom to heart, trickling in. Old Man Henderson, who always ordered the farmer's breakfast with extra crispy bacon, Mrs. Gable, who insisted on her coffee black as night and a single perfectly toasted bagel, and the shift workers from the mill coming off a long night seeking a hearty plate of eggs and sausage to fuel them through the morning. The diner would fill with the comforting clatter of plates, the hum of conversations, and Peterson's gruff bark from behind the counter. Maggie, hidden mostly in the kitchen, would be a whirlwind of focused energy. Her spatula would dance across the griddle, flipping pancakes with an almost balletic grace. Her movements were fluid, practiced, a testament to years spent mastering her art. She rarely made a mistake, and if a dish wasn't exactly right, she'd remake it without a word. A silent perfectionist. Sometimes Peterson would stick his head into the kitchen, his brow furrowed. "Maggie, you got enough eggs back there. Henderson's going for a second round of that scramble." Or, "Table 5 needs those waffles stat. Their patience is wearing thin." Maggie would just nod, a tiny smile playing on her lips. She knew Peterson was proud of her, even if he rarely showed it. He'd seen plenty of cooks come and go, but none, he'd grudgingly admit, had the touch that Maggie had. Her cooking wasn't fancy, not by a long shot. It was simple food, elevated to something sublime. Her fried chicken was legendary, crispy on the outside, juicy within, with a secret blend of spices that no one could quite figure out. Her apple pie made with tart Granny Smiths and a flaky crust that melted in your mouth could bring tears to a grown man's eyes. It was food that reminded you of home, of childhood, of comfort. Maggie didn't dream of opening a 5-star restaurant or becoming a celebrity. Chef, her dreams were quieter, more rooted in the everyday. She just wanted to keep cooking, keep making people happy with her food, keep the traditions of her grandmother alive in this humble diner. The rhythm of the kitchen was her solace. The clatter of plates, her music, and the satisfied sighs of her customers. Her greatest reward, As the lunch rush wound down and the diner quieted to a gentle hum of afternoon conversations, Maggie would begin the lengthy cleanup. She'd scrub the griddle until it gleamed, wipe down every surface, and prepare ingredients for the next day. It was a cycle predictable and comforting. One late afternoon, as Maggie was meticulously polishing the stainless steel countertops, Peterson walked into the kitchen, a rare occurrence. Outside of a busy shift, he wasn't holding a stack of orders or grumbling about a customer. He was just standing there, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, a strange expression on his face. "Maggie," he started, his voice lower than usual. "You hear anything about that commotion over in Springfield?" Maggie paused, wiping a smudge off the counter. "Just that a big shot's in town. Some movie star, isn't it?" She didn't pay much attention to celebrity gossip. Her world was confined to her kitchen, her ingredients, and her customers. Peterson nodded slowly, his eyes wide with a hint of disbelief. "More than a movie star, Maggie. They're saying it's the king." Maggie blinked, her hand still on the cloth. "The king?" She knew who the king was, everyone did. But Elvis Presley in Harmony Creek seemed impossible, like a wild rumor spun out of thin air. She just shook her head and went back to her polishing, dismissing it as just another piece of local exaggeration. Little did she know the quiet hum of her life was about to be interrupted by a melody from a much grander stage. The familiar scent of home in her diner was about to mix with the unexpected scent of fame. The whispers started small, a barely audible rustle over morning coffee at Mabel's diner. Then it picked up speed, and by the lunch rush, it was a full-blown roar, echoing off the walls of the cozy establishment. Elvis Presley. Someone breathed, wide-eyed, over a stack of pancakes. "He's in town." Maggie, tucked away in her kitchen, heard it all. A constant hum filtering through the swinging doors. She heard the waitresses, usually calm and collected, giggling nervously as they refilled coffee cups. She heard Peterson, usually dismissive of anything that wasn't about the day's profits, actually listening intently to the customers' excited chatter. "They say he's got a show in the next state," over one customer, Frank, from the gas station, speculated loudly. "But his car broke down somewhere nearby, and he's laying low." "Nonsense," scoffed another Martha, the town librarian. "He's probably just here for some quiet, to get away from all the hullabaloo herd. He likes a good fishing spot." Maggie rolled her eyes good-naturedly as she chopped onions for the afternoon's meatloaf special. Elvis Presley in Harmony Creek. It seemed absurd. Harmony Creek was a town where the most exciting thing that usually happened was the annual Pumpkin Festival. A global icon like Elvis didn't just drop in for a visit. It was probably just another one of those tall tales that spread like wildfire through small towns, fueled by boredom and too much caffeine. Still, the sheer volume of the talk was unusual. Every customer seemed to have a new piece of information, a new sighting, a new rumor. The gas station attendant swore he saw a Cadillac long and shiny, like a black mirror parked discreetly behind the old mill. The postman claimed a stack of fan mail, addressed to a pseudonym, had arrived at the local inn. Even the mayor's wife was seen flitting around town, looking suspiciously important, and tight-lipped Peterson surprisingly seemed to take it seriously, kept peeking out from behind the counter, his eyes scanning the street, as if expecting Elvis to just saunter in, demand a banana sandwich, and start singing. Maggie watched him, amused. Peterson was usually so grounded, so focused on the mundane, but even he wasn't immune to the siren call of celebrity. "You really think he's here?" Maggie asked Peterson one afternoon, after the lunch rush had dwindled to just a few stragglers. She was scrubbing the griddle, her back to him. Peterson grunted, polishing the counter with a practiced hand. "Wouldn't surprise me. This town, quiet as it is, it's perfect for someone wanting to disappear for a bit. And folks around here, they generally mind their own business for the most part." He shot a quick glance at the tables where a couple of ladies were still whispering excitedly. Maggie just hummed, unconvinced. She liked her quiet life. She liked the predictability of her days. The idea of a famous person, especially one as famous as Elvis, descending upon their little town, felt disruptive. It felt like a splash of vibrant, chaotic paint on her carefully ordered canvas. Over the next few days, the Elvis buzz only intensified. The local newspaper, usually reserved for reports on town council meetings and bake sales, even ran a speculative piece on page 3. Is the King in Harmony Creek? It featured a blurry, distant photo of what might have been a black Cadillac. People started hanging around the diner longer, hoping to catch a glimpse of something, anything. Tourists from neighboring towns, drawn by the rumors, began to show up, ordering coffee and nervously eyeing the entrance. The diner, usually a hub for locals, became a stage for hopeful celebrity watchers. Maggie found it a bit exhausting. The increased customer traffic meant more work, which she didn't mind. But the heightened anticipation, the constant murmur of Elvis's name, made the air feel thick with expectation. She just wanted to cook, to focus on the food, to make sure every dish was perfect, regardless of who might or might not walk through the door. She kept her head down, her movements efficient and precise. She perfected a new batch of biscuits, fluffier than ever. She experimented with a subtly spicier chili recipe. She doubled down on her work, using the cooking as an anchor in the midst of the town's celebrity-fueled frenzy. One afternoon, a sharp, authoritative-looking man in a dark suit came into the diner. He looked around slowly, his gaze lingering on every corner, every customer. Peterson, usually quick to greet newcomers, seemed to stiffen behind the counter. The man ordered a plain black coffee and sat at a table in the back, observing. He didn't speak to anyone, just watched. Maggie saw him from the kitchen through the small opening of the service window. She noticed his watchful eyes, his carefully groomed hair. He didn't seem like a tourist. He seemed purposeful. He stayed for over an hour, nursing his coffee, occasionally making a quiet call on a rather large, clunky phone. When he finally left, he dropped a $20 bill on the table for a $2 coffee and walked out without a word, his gaze sweeping the street before he disappeared. Peterson let out a long breath he seemed to have been holding. That, he muttered to the waitress, was no ordinary customer. The air in the diner felt different after that. A certain tension had entered the atmosphere. A quiet hum that vibrated beneath the surface of the usual diner chatter. The rumors had started as a whisper, then grown into a roar. Now, after the man in the suit, they felt like a palpable presence just on the other side of the diner's door. Maggie, for the first time, felt a flicker of something other than amusement. A tiny knot of anticipation began to form in her stomach. Could it be true? Could Harmony Creek, her quiet, unassuming town, really be on the verge of hosting the King? She didn't know whether to be thrilled or terrified. All she knew was that the regular rhythm of her kitchen, the comforting predictability of her day, felt poised on the edge of a great, unknown change. She just hoped she had enough fresh eggs. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, but the usual hum of Mabel's diner felt charged, almost electric. The air thrummed with unspoken expectation. Even the regulars, usually quick to dive into their breakfast, and the morning paper cast nervous glances at the door. Maggie felt it too. A strange tension in her shoulders as she cracked eggs for the breakfast rush. Just before 8 a.m., the diner door chimed a sound, so familiar it was usually ignored, but this time every head snapped up. And then a hush fell thick and immediate, like a velvet curtain dropping on a stage. Standing in the doorway, framed by the morning sunlight, was Elvis Presley. He wasn't in a flashy stage outfit. He wore a simple dark jacket, a white shirt, and dark trousers. His hair, famously sculpted, was a little ruffled, as if he'd just woken up. Dark sunglasses obscured his eyes, but even so, his presence filled the room, radiating a quiet power. He looked a little tired, a little worn, but undeniably iconic. For a moment, no one moved. The clatter of cutlery stopped. A half-eaten piece of toast hovered mid-air. Peterson, usually a pillar of gruff composure, stood frozen behind the counter, a coffee pot forgotten in his hand. Elvis took a slow breath, his chest rising and falling. He seemed to take in the quiet room, the lingering smell of bacon and coffee. Then he offered a small, hesitant smile that softened his famous features. "Morning, folks," he said, his voice a low southern drawl that was instantly recognizable, even huskier than it sounded on the radio. "Hope I'm not intruding, just looking for a good quiet breakfast." The spell broke a little. A few whispers rippled through the diner. One of the waitresses, a young woman named Brenda, nearly dropped her tray. Peterson, regaining his composure with a visible effort, cleared his throat. "Well now," Peterson managed, his voice a little rougher than usual. "Welcome to Mabel's Diner, Mr. Presley. We don't get many high-profile guests." Elvis chuckled, a genuine sound that eased the tension in the room even further. "Just Elvis, please. And I'm just a hungry man looking for a meal. Any chance you got a free booth in the back?" Peterson quickly pointed to a booth tucked away in the corner, somewhat out of direct line of sight from the street. "Right this way, sir. Brenda, get Mr. Presley some coffee and a menu." As Elvis walked past the counter, his presence was undeniable. He didn't stride like a king. He moved with a slight weariness, but with an underlying grace. He nodded politely to a few stunned customers, offering a brief, almost shy smile. He settled into the booth, pulling off his sunglasses. His eyes, a striking blue, looked tired but alert. Maggie, hidden in the kitchen, had witnessed the whole scene through the service window. Her heart hammered against her ribs. It was him, the king, in her diner looking for breakfast. Her first instinct was a surge of pure, unadulterated panic. What did you cook for Elvis Presley? Did he have special dietary needs? Did he only eat gourmet food? Her simple, honest diner fare suddenly felt woefully inadequate. Peterson poked his head into the kitchen, his face a mixture of awe and suppressed excitement. "Maggie, you believe it? It's him, Elvis. He wants breakfast. What are you going to make him?" His voice was a hushed whisper, as if he feared startling the celebrity. Maggie felt a rush of adrenaline, her mind racing. "What does he want?" she asked, her voice tight. Brenda, still a little shaky, came into the kitchen holding a notepad. "He just said, 'Whatever you do best, darling.' Something hearty and a side of extra crispy bacon." Maggie stared at the notepad. Whatever you do best, that was it. No complicated requests. No strange demands. Just trust. It was exactly what her regular customers would say. And suddenly the panic began to recede, replaced by a surge of professional pride. This wasn't about cooking for a king. It was about cooking for a man who just wanted a good, honest meal. And Maggie knew how to do that. This was her kitchen. This was her domain. She would treat him like any other customer, but with every ounce of her skill and passion. She took a deep breath. Her hands, which had been trembling slightly, now steady. She wouldn't try to be fancy. She would be Maggie. "Right," she said, her voice firm. "Hash, my special recipe, and 3 eggs over easy. And that extra crispy bacon. Lots of it." Peterson blinked. "Hash for Elvis. It's hearty," Maggie repan. "And I do it best." She knew her hash was legendary. Potatoes, onions, peppers, slow-cooked corned beef, all fried to a perfect golden crispness. It was pure comfort food, a dish that spoke of home and warmth. It was perfect. As she worked, a strange calm settled over her. The kitchen became her sanctuary. She carefully diced the potatoes, the knife rhythmic against the cutting board. She chopped the onions and peppers, their sharp scent filling the air. She pulled out the rich, lean corned beef she'd prepared the day before. Each movement was precise, deliberate. She poured her usual care into the dish, but with an added intensity, a silent challenge to herself. This wasn't just a meal, it was a performance. Quiet culinary performance for a very special audience of one. She heard Brenda come back out telling Elvis what she was making him. She couldn't hear his exact words, but she heard a low murmur of approval, followed by the soft clinking of cutlery as he picked up his coffee cup. Maggie focused on the sizzling hash on the griddle, the eggs gently frying in their own pan, the bacon crackling invitingly. She felt the heat, smelled the glorious aromas, and for a moment the fame of her customer faded away. It was just her food, and the simple, profound joy of creating something delicious. She plated the meal carefully. A generous mound of golden brown hash, 3 perfectly cooked eggs nestled on top, their yolks still runny and bright, and a generous pile of amber crisp bacon. A sprig of parsley, a tiny touch of green for presentation. It looked like a painting. "Order up," she called, her voice clear and strong. Brenda came to the window, her eyes wide. "Wow, Maggie, that looks amazing." She watched as Brenda carried the plate out, her steps a little more confident now. She saw Elvis look down at the plate, and a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. He picked up his fork, and Maggie, hidden behind her kitchen doors, held her breath, waiting for the king to taste her hash. Elvis Presley picked up his fork, his gaze still fixed on the plate in front of him. Maggie watched from the kitchen, her heart doing a nervous little jig. This wasn't a concert hall, it was a humble diner. But for Maggie, this was her stage, and the king was her audience. The silence from his table stretched thick with anticipation. Then he took his first bite. Maggie held her breath. She watched his jaw work, watched the subtle shift in his expression. His brow furrowed slightly. Then his eyes, those famous blue eyes, closed for a fleeting moment. A small sound, almost a hum, escaped his lips. He opened his eyes and looked at Brenda, who stood nervously by his table. "Brenda, darlin'," he drawled, his voice low and rich, "who cooked this?" Brenda pointed towards the kitchen. "That's Maggie, sir. She's the best cook in 3 counties. Elvis turned his head slightly, peering towards the kitchen's swinging doors. Maggie quickly ducked back out of sight, a blush rising on her cheeks. She could feel his gaze even through the wall. Then he took another bite, and another, and another. Ate with an unhurried appreciation, savoring each forkful. The way he ate wasn't rushed or greedy, but thoughtful, as if he were truly tasting every ingredient, every nuance of flavor. He was clearly enjoying it, really enjoying it. A wave of relief washed over Maggie, followed by a quiet, deep satisfaction. This was her reward. More than any applause, more than any fancy review, the genuine enjoyment of her food was what truly mattered. After a few minutes, Elvis set down his fork, but only to pick up a piece of the crispy bacon. He looked up at Brenda again. "This bacon, it's perfect. Exactly how I like it. Tell Maggie thank you." Brenda relayed the message, her smile beaming. Maggie, hidden, offered a silent nod of acknowledgement. He finished the hash, scooping up every last bit with a piece of toast he'd ordered. He wiped his mouth with a napkin, a contented sigh escaping him. Then he leaned back in the booth, looking more relaxed than when he'd first walked in. Peterson, who had been hovering near the counter pretending to wipe it down, finally approached Elvis's table. "Everything to your liking, Mr. Presley?" he asked, trying to sound casual, but his voice still held a hint of awe. Elvis smiled warmly. "Peterson, right? Everything was more than to my liking. That hash, that's a meal I haven't tasted in years. Tastes like my mama's cooking almost." Maggie, hearing that from the kitchen, felt a lump form in her throat. "Tastes like my mama's cooking." For a cook like Maggie, there was no higher compliment. It meant her food wasn't just good. It was soul-stirring. It evoked memories, comfort, a sense of home. That was her goal every single day. "Well, Maggie's the best." Peterson swelled with pride, his usual grumpiness momentarily forgotten. "She puts her heart into every dish." "I can tell," Elvis said, his gaze drifting towards the kitchen again. "Is she busy? I'd like to personally thank her." Maggie's stomach did another flip. Meet him face to face, she was a cook, not a socialite. She usually avoided direct contact with customers, preferring the anonymity of her kitchen. Peterson poked his head into the kitchen again. "Maggie, Mr. Presley wants to thank you in person." He had a triumphant grin on his face. She wiped her hands on her apron, took a deep breath, and finally pushed through the swinging doors. Elvis looked up, and his smile widened. He stood, a gesture of respect that surprised her. He was taller than she expected, and his eyes, now that the sunglasses were off, were truly striking. A bright, clear blue that held a surprising kindness. "Maggie, is it?" he said. Extending a hand, "Elvis Presley, that was without a doubt one of the finest breakfasts I've ever had. Truly, that hash. It brought back a lot of memories." Maggie felt her cheeks flush. "Thank you, Mr. Presley," she managed, her voice a little shy. "I'm glad you enjoyed it." "Please call me Elvis," he insisted gently. "And enjoyed doesn't quite cover it. It was more than just food. It was comforting, like a hug on a plate. You got a real gift, Maggie." He looked at her, really looked at her, and she felt the genuine sincerity radiating from him. He wasn't just being polite. He meant it. For a moment, the world-famous Elvis Presley faded and she saw just a man, tired perhaps, but deeply appreciative. "I just cook what I know," Maggie said, finding a little more confidence. "Simple, honest food, and that's the best kind," Elvis agreed, nodding. "Kind that reminds you of what's real, away from all the noise." He glanced briefly around the now bustling diner where whispers had resumed, and customers were covertly trying to snap pictures. He sat back down, signaling to Brenda for another cup of coffee. "You know, Maggie," he continued, leaning forward slightly, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone, "I travel all over, stay in the fanciest hotels, eat the fanciest meals, but sometimes all you want is something real, something made with heart." He met her gaze, and in his eyes Maggie saw a flicker of loneliness, a quiet yearning for normalcy that surprised her. It was a fleeting moment, but it was enough to pierce through the celebrity facade and reveal a deeper truth. He wasn't just the king. He was also a man who missed home. Maggie didn't know what to say. She just offered a small, genuine smile. The interaction had been brief, but profound. She felt a connection not as a fan to a star, but as one human being to another, brought together by the simple magic of good food. She was no longer just the cook who fed a celebrity. She was the cook who had given Elvis Presley a taste of home, and that, she realized, was a gift beyond measure. After that initial exchange, Maggie found herself lingering near the kitchen service window, occasionally peeking out at Elvis. He sat quietly in his booth, nursing his second cup of coffee. He wasn't talking on the phone, or signing autographs, or doing anything that screamed global superstar. He was just being, observing the diner, the regulars, the small-town life unfolding around him. He seemed content in the quiet normalcy. Brenda, sensing his relaxed mood, approached him with a timid request for an autograph. Elvis smiled patiently and obliged, even chatting with her for a moment about her favorite songs. He was gracious, approachable, and seemed genuinely kind. Maggie watched him from the shadows of the kitchen. There was a vulnerability about him that she hadn't expected. The way he had said, "away from all the noise," the slight weariness in his eyes, it suggested a man constantly under pressure, perhaps yearning for a break from the relentless spotlight. Peterson, emboldened by Elvis's easygoing manner, actually went over and pulled up a chair at his booth. For the next half hour, the usually gruff diner owner and the king of rock and roll had a surprisingly ordinary conversation. Maggie heard snatches of it. Talk about fishing, about the weather, about the local high school football team. Elvis asked Peterson about the town, about how long the diner had been open, about Maggie's cooking philosophy. Peterson, beaming, regaled Elvis with stories about Maggie's early days at the diner, how she'd transformed the menu, how her pies were legendary. Maggie felt her face grow warm, but a small flutter of pride swelled in her chest. Eventually, Peterson excused himself to tend to other customers, and Elvis was left alone again. After a moment, he looked toward the kitchen, and Maggie, caught in the act of peeking, ducked back. But then she heard his voice, soft but clear. "Maggie, you got a moment. I don't mean to bother you." Maggie hesitated for only a second. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped out, walking over to his booth. "Yes, Elvis." He gestured to the empty seat opposite him. Mind if you join me for a spell, just for a minute? It's quiet company is hard to come by these days. Maggie, surprised by the invitation and the raw honesty in his voice, slid into the booth. She felt a little out of place sitting opposite Elvis Presley, but also a strange sense of ease. He was looking at her with an open, friendly gaze. "You really do have a gift, Maggie," he repeated, his voice earnest. "That hash. It was simple, yes, but it was perfect. And that's harder to find than you'd think, you know." "I just try to make food that makes people feel good," Maggie said, looking down at her hands, which were now clasped in her lap. "My grandmother taught me," she used to say, "food is love made visible." Elvis chuckled softly. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman, my mama. She said something similar. She said if you ain't putting your heart in it, you ain't cooking right." He sighed, a wistful sound. "I miss her cooking, miss those simple times." He paused, then looked at her again. "It's funny. You know, people see the lights, the crowd's limousine." She just let him speak. Sensing that he needed to simply voice these thoughts, she understood in a way she never expected. Her own life, while not filled with the clamor of fame, had its own quiet struggles, its own yearning for simplicity and authenticity. Kitchen was her refuge, much like his. Music was his, but both came with their own pressures. "It must be a lot," Maggie finally said, choosing her words carefully. He nodded slowly. "It is. It's a privilege, don't get me wrong. I'm blessed, but it's also a cage. Everywhere I go, people see Elvis Presley, the performer, not just me." He gestured vaguely to himself. "Just a fella who likes good food and a quiet morning." He looked at her, and a genuine smile touched his lips. "You treat me like a fella who likes good food, Maggie, and I appreciate that more than you know." Maggie felt a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just about his compliments on her cooking. It was about the unexpected connection, the shared moment of understanding. She, the quiet cook from Harmony Creek, was having a real human conversation with Elvis Presley, the global icon, and in that moment the fame didn't matter. It was just two people sharing a quiet space, finding common ground in the universal language of yearning for something real. "Well," Maggie said, finally breaking the comfortable silence, "I better get back to it. Peterson will have my head if I'm not preparing for the lunch crowd." She half joked, feeling lighter than she had in days. Elvis laughed, a deep, resonant sound that was genuinely joyful. "You're a good woman, Maggie, and a phenomenal cook." He stood up, extending his hand again. "Thank you for the meal and for the company." Maggie shook his hand, feeling the surprising warmth of his touch once more. "Anytime, Elvis," she said, surprising herself at the ease of the words. He gave her a final genuine smile, then turned and walked towards the counter to pay. As he left, the diner's spell seemed to break, and the excited whispers and camera flashes resumed. But Maggie, watching him go, knew that she had seen something beyond the legend, a glimpse behind the veil. And it was a moment she would carry with her tucked away like a precious secret. She had not only fed the king's hunger, she had, for a brief time, nourished his spirit. The departure of Elvis Presley from Mabel's diner was as quiet and unassuming as his initial arrival had been. After settling his bill with Peterson, leaving a generous tip that made Brenda's eyes go wide, he paused at the door, turning back to offer a final lingering look at the diner. He raised a hand in a small, almost imperceptible wave to Maggie, who stood framed in the kitchen doorway. And then he was gone. The chimes above the door settled back into silence, but the echoes of his presence vibrated through the diner. The room, which had been buzzing with hushed excitement, now erupted. Customers who had been trying to appear nonchalant suddenly burst into animated chatter. Phones came out, stories were exchanged, and a general consensus was a mixture of disbelief and exhilaration. "Did you see him? He signed my napkin. He ate all of Maggie's hash." Peterson came into the kitchen, his face still flushed with a mixture of awe and pride. "Maggie, did you see that? He shook your hand. And he sat and talked to you. You're practically famous now." Maggie just smiled faintly. leaning against the counter. She felt a strange mix of emotions. There was the obvious thrill of having cooked for a legend, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing her food had genuinely pleased him. But more than that, there was a sense of profound quietude, almost a melancholy. The encounter, brief as it was, had been intensely personal for her. She had seen beyond the persona, and that glimpse of the man behind the myth had touched her deeply. "He was just a regular person, Peterson," she said softly, though she knew it wasn't entirely true. He was far from regular, but he had, for a moment, allowed himself to be seen as one, a regular person who happens to be the king. Peterson retorted, shaking his head in wonder. "This is going to put Mabel's diner on the map. Maggie, you just wait." For the rest of the day, the diner was a whirlwind of excited energy. Every new customer who came in was immediately told the story of Elvis's visit, embellished slightly with each retelling. The booth where he sat became a shrine with customers discreetly trying to touch the seat cushion. Brenda and the other waitresses basked in the reflected glory, eager to share their small part in the historic event. Maggie, however, retreated into her kitchen. The immediate rush of adrenaline had subsided, leaving behind a thoughtful calm. She continued to cook, to clean, to prepare for the next day, but her mind kept replaying the moments: Elvis's contented sigh over her hash, his genuine smile, the unexpected vulnerability in his eyes, the sincere thanks for the company. She thought about his words. "Just a fella who likes good food and a quiet morning." It resonated with her own quiet life, her dedication to her craft in the midst of a bustling world. He, with all his fame and fortune, had found comfort in the simple things, the very things Maggie poured her heart into every day. As the diner finally emptied out in the late afternoon, and the sounds of Main Street quieted, Maggie began her deep clean. The griddle sizzled as she scrubbed it, steam rising around her. The air still carried faint echoes of bacon and coffee, mixed now with the ghost of a rich southern voice. Peterson came into the kitchen, a thoughtful look on his face. He wasn't grinning anymore. He just looked tired, but satisfied. "Quite a day, eh, Maggie?" "Quite a day," she agreed, wringing out her dishcloth. "You know," he said, leaning against the counter, "I've seen a lot of things in this diner. A lot of people come and go. But I don't think I've ever seen anyone appreciate your cooking quite like that." He truly meant it. Maggie looked at him, and for a rare moment Peterson's gruff exterior seemed to soften completely. He was genuinely impressed, not just by the celebrity, but by the impact Maggie's food had made. He said it reminded him of his mama's cooking, Maggie murmured almost to herself. Peterson nodded slowly. "Highest compliment, Maggie. Highest compliment indeed. You gave him more than just breakfast today. You gave him a piece of home." That night, as Maggie lay in her bed above the diner, the silence of the town wrapped around her. She found it hard to sleep. Her mind replayed the scene in the diner. The image of Elvis, not the performing legend, but the quiet, appreciative man, lingered. She thought about his loneliness, his yearning for authenticity, and she felt a profound sense of purpose. Her food wasn't just about filling bellies, it was about nourishing souls. It was about creating comfort, evoking memories, building connections, however fleeting. She had always known this in a vague, intuitive way. Today, the visit from Elvis had brought that truth into sharp, undeniable focus. The diner had returned to its normal, comforting rhythm. But something inside Maggie had shifted. The encounter had validated her, not just as a cook, but as someone who could touch lives through her simple, heartfelt art. She wasn't just serving meals, she was serving moments. And for a brief, unexpected moment, she had served the king himself, leaving him with a taste of something he truly missed. Quiet departure of Elvis from Harmony Creek was just the beginning of his lasting presence in Maggie's heart, and in the history of Mabel's Diner. In the days and weeks that followed Elvis Presley's unexpected visit, Mabel's Diner transformed. It wasn't just a local eatery anymore, it was a landmark. The story of the King's Breakfast became an instant legend. whispered at the grocery store, recounted at church, and debated at the barber shop. Initially, Maggie found the sudden attention a little overwhelming. New customers, drawn by the irresistible allure of the Elvis story, flocked to the diner. They came from neighboring towns, and even a few from out of state, all wanting to sit in his booth, to order his hash, to breathe the same air the king had breathed. Peterson, predictably, was thrilled. The diner, which had always been steady, was now bustling from open to close. He even ordered a new sign to put outside a temporary one, proclaiming, "Home of the King's Breakfast." It was tacky, Maggie thought, but she couldn't deny its effectiveness. "We need to put a little plaque on his booth, Maggie," Peterson declared one busy morning, his eyes sparkling with delight. "Something that says Elvis Presley sat here." Maggie just shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "Just let them eat the food, Peterson. That's what matters." But even as she said it, she knew the food was now inextricably linked to the legend. People would order the hash, close their eyes, and try to imagine Elvis savoring it, hoping to catch a glimmer of the magic he left behind. Maggie continued to pour her heart into every dish, even more so now. She felt an invisible weight of expectation, a silent promise to uphold the standard that Elvis himself had praised. Every plate of hash had to be perfect, every piece of bacon extra crispy, every coffee rich and strong. She didn't want anyone to be disappointed, least of all the memory of that quiet, appreciative man who had sat in her diner. She often found herself glancing at his booth, imagining him there, a ghost of a smile on his lips. She remembered his words, his vulnerability, the brief, shared moment of connection. It was a memory she held close, a quiet treasure. Amidst a public frenzy, the town too felt the lingering presence of Elvis. Harmony Creek, once a sleepy dot on the map, was suddenly on the radar. The local news ran, "Follow-up story." National fan clubs sent letters asking for details about his visit. The local inn, which had supposedly hosted him, was fully booked for weeks. For Maggie, it meant longer hours, more pressure. She was tired, but also invigorated. Her cooking, which had always been her passion, now felt imbued with a new purpose, a grander significance. She wasn't just cooking for the locals, she was cooking for a legacy. Sometimes a reporter would come into the diner, wanting to interview her. Maggie would politely decline, always redirecting them to Peterson. She wasn't comfortable in the spotlight. Her place was in the kitchen, a quiet artist perfecting her craft. She preferred to let her food speak for itself. "Why won't you talk to them, Maggie?" Peterson asked her one afternoon. "You cooked for Elvis Presley. That's a story people want to hear." "'Cause the story isn't about me, Peterson," Maggie replied, her voice soft. "It's about the food and about him. I just made the breakfasts." Peterson just grunted, but he understood. He knew Maggie's quiet nature, her humility. It was part of what made her special. One morning, a group of genuine Elvis fans dressed in modest fan club attire arrived at the diner. They were respectful, quiet, almost reverent. They ordered the hash, of course, and then asked Brenda if they could take a picture of the booth. As Maggie watched them, she noticed something. They weren't just curious tourists. They were genuinely moved. They spoke about Elvis with a deep affection, not just as a performer, but as a person. They believed in the magic he brought, and in a small way, Maggie realized her diner and her food had become a part of that magic. She saw one woman with tears in her eyes gently touch the tabletop where Elvis had eaten. "It's like he was just here," she whispered to her friend. And in a way he was. His presence, his appreciation, had seeped into the very fabric of the diner, leaving an indelible mark. It wasn't just a fleeting celebrity entry and bah. Elvis had been looking for something real, something quiet, something made with heart, and she had given it to him. Now, she had to ensure that the diner, despite its newfound fame, maintained that same spirit, that same authenticity. The framed note wasn't there yet. The diner's history was still being written. The quiet hum of Elvis's visit, the lingering presence of his appreciation, was already a permanent part of Mabel's diner, a silent promise of something yet to come, something that would cement the legend forever. The quiet cook, Maggie O'Malley, had unknowingly set the stage for a lasting legacy, built not on celebrity but on the simple, powerful act of making someone feel truly at home. Weeks turned into a month. Then two. The initial frenzy around Elvis Presley's visit to Mabel's diner had mellowed slightly, but the diner still enjoyed a steady stream of Elvis tourists. The booth remained his booth, and the hash remained the most requested item on the menu. Maggie continued to cook with the same dedication, sometimes feeling a pang of wistfulness for the quiet pre-Elvis days, but mostly feeling a profound sense of purpose. One unusually quiet Tuesday afternoon, just as the last of the lunch customers were heading out, the postman arrived. He wasn't the usual cheerful Harmony Creek postman. This was a new, younger fellow, looking rather flustered. He carried a package larger and more formal than anything usually delivered to Mabel's diner. "Peterson," he asked, holding out the package. "Sign here, special delivery from Memphis." Memphis? He took the package, felt its weight. It was flat, rectangular, wrapped in thick brown paper, and seemed important. He signed, his brow furrowed in curiosity. Maggie, cleaning the coffee machine. She rarely paid attention to mail, but something about this package felt different. Peterson tore open the brown paper carefully, revealing a sturdy cardboard box. Inside, nestled among layers of tissue paper, was a beautiful dark wooden frame, and inside the frame, protected by glass, was a piece of creamy stationery. Maggie walked closer, a strange premonition fluttering in her chest. Peterson pulled the framed piece out, turning it over slowly. His eyes widened and his jaw dropped. "Maggie," he whispered, his voice hushed with disbelief. "Maggie, look at this." He held it out to her. It was a thank you note, beautifully penned in elegant script, and at the bottom, scrawled with an unmistakable flourish, was a signature. Elvis Presley. Maggie took the frame, her hands trembling slightly. She read the note, her eyes scanning each word. "Dear Maggie, I wanted to extend my sincerest gratitude for the wonderful breakfast you prepared for me a few weeks ago. The hash, the eggs, the bacon, it was all truly exceptional. But more than just the food, I wanted to thank you for the genuine warmth and kindness I found in your diner. It was a welcome respite from the road and the noise. Your cooking brought back cherished memories of home, and for that I am eternally grateful. You have a rare and special talent, not just for cooking, but for making people feel. Accept this small token of my appreciation. Keep doing what you do, Maggie. Your heart shines through your food. With deepest appreciation." It was a personal message, delivered directly to her, confirming everything she had felt during their brief encounter. He had remembered. He had truly appreciated it. A tear, unbidden, traced a path down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude and profound validation. All those years pouring her soul into her food, often unnoticed, often taken for granted, and now, this from Elvis. He had seen her. He had seen her heart. Peterson, watching her, cleared his throat, his own eyes suspiciously moist. "Well, I'll be." He really did mean it, didn't he? Maggie nodded, unable to speak, clutching the framed note to her chest as if it were the most precious thing she owned. "He called it a rare and special talent," Peterson murmured, reading over her shoulder. "He's right, Maggie, he's absolutely right. The note wasn't just a celebrity memento. It was a testament to Maggie's passion, her dedication, her quiet art. It was proof that her grandmother's words were true. Food truly was love made visible. And sometimes, that love reached across the biggest divides. For a long moment, they just stood there, Maggie holding the framed note, Peterson looking on, both awestruck by the simple, profound gesture. The diner was silent around them, a hushed witness to a moment of quiet revelation. Maggie gently placed the framed note on the counter, running her fingers over the glass over his signature. It wasn't just a thank you, it was an acknowledgement. A recognition of her artistry, her hard work, and the silent language of care she spoke through her food. "What are we going to do with it?" Peterson finally asked, his voice still a little shaky. Maggie looked up, a soft, determined light in her eyes. "We're going to put it somewhere where everyone can see it, Peterson. Somewhere everyone can read it. It's not just for me." She wanted everyone to know that kindness mattered, that genuine appreciation could travel across great distances, and that even the king of rock and roll valued a simple meal made with heart. The note had arrived, and it was about to change Mabel's diner, forever cementing its place not just in local lore, but in the heart of a small town's proud history. The arrival of Elvis Presley's thank you note sparked a fresh wave of excitement in Harmony Creek. It was one thing to hear a rumor or even to know he had visited. It was quite another to have tangible proof, a personal message from the king himself, framed and undeniable. Peterson, beaming with unprecedented pride, declared that the note would be given a place of honor. "It's going right here," he announced to Maggie, gesturing to the wall behind the counter, right above the cash register. "Everyone who walks in, everyone who pays, they'll see it, they'll know." Maggie agreed without hesitation. This wasn't about showing off. It was about sharing the story, the connection, and the unexpected warmth that had come from such a grand figure. It was a testament to the power of simple kindness and genuine appreciation. The next day, Peterson carefully hung the framed note. He didn't just nail it to the wall. He brought in a special spotlight to illuminate it, making the creamy paper and elegant script glow softly. It looked less like a diner and more like a small museum exhibit. The first few customers to see it stopped dead in their tracks. "Is that?" a woman gasped, pointing a trembling finger. Peterson, puffing out his chest, would launch into the story with renewed vigor. "Indeed it is. A personal thank you from Elvis Presley himself to our very own Maggie for that legendary breakfast." The note quickly became the diner's most prized possession, eclipsing even Maggie's famous pies. In terms of immediate wonder, people would line up, not just for coffee and breakfast, but to read the note word for word. They would whisper about it, point and take pictures with their clunky cameras. "He said rare and special talent," one customer would exclaim, "and your heart shines through your food," another would echo, looking at Maggie with a new sense of reverence. Maggie, ever the humble cook, found herself the subject of even more attention. Customers would peer into the kitchen, offer compliments, and ask her to recount the story. She would offer a shy smile and a brief, honest version of events, always deflecting the praise back to the food itself. "It was just a simple breakfast," she'd say, though her eyes held a deeper private knowledge of the moment's significance. The note cemented Mabel's diner's place as a local legend. It wasn't just the diner where Elvis ate. It was the diner where Elvis sent a personal thank you note. The distinction was important. It implied a deeper connection, a mutual respect between the legendary performer and the unassuming cook. The framing of the note had a profound effect on the diner's atmosphere. It infused the place with a quiet pride, a sense of history. Customers didn't just come for the food, they came for the story, for the connection to a moment in time when a superstar found peace and a taste of home in a small town diner. For Maggie, the note was a constant source of inspiration. When the early mornings felt too long or the lunch rush too chaotic, she would glance at the framed note on the wall. Its words would remind her of the profound impact of her cooking, of the power of pouring her heart into every dish. It wasn't just about feeding people. It was about nourishing them, connecting with them even from afar. It also meant that Maggie felt a renewed commitment to her craft. If her food was good enough to earn such an honor from Elvis Presley, then it had to continue to be exceptional. She experimented with new recipes, perfected old ones, always striving for that elusive balance of comfort, flavor, and soul. Peterson, for all his gruffness, was openly sentimental about the note. He'd often stand behind the counter gazing up at it, a soft, uncharacteristic smile on his face. "Imagine that, Maggie," he'd say, "the king himself. He really did love your food." The note became a symbol not just of Elvis's visit, but of Mabel's diner itself. It stood for authenticity, for the quiet pursuit of excellence, and for the simple, heartwarming power of genuine human connection. It told a story of a moment when fame met humility, and both were enriched. Children who came into the diner with their parents would point at the note, their eyes wide. "That's Elvis Presley?" they'd ask, barely believing it. The note became a touchstone, a piece of living history for generations to come. Maggie often thought about Elvis out there somewhere, living his extraordinary life. She wondered if he ever thought about the little diner in Harmony Creek, about the hash that tasted like his mama's cooking. She hoped he did. The framed note was more than just paper and ink. It was a culmination of Maggie's life's work, a testament to her quiet passion. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest impact came not from grand gestures, but from the simple act of making something truly, honestly, and deliciously, with heart. It was a legacy, etched not in stone, but in the enduring memory of a special breakfast and a king's heartfelt thank you. Decades passed in Harmony Creek as they do in all quiet towns. Colors of the diner's exterior faded and were repainted. Twice over. Peterson, after many years of grumbling and beaming in equal measure, finally retired. Passing the ownership of Mabel's diner to Maggie, it seemed only right. She was its heart and soul. Maggie, now in her 60s, her dark hair streaked with silver, still woke before the sun. The aroma of coffee still filled the diner, the griddle still hummed, and the clatter of plates still marked the rhythm of the day. Some of the regulars were gone, replaced by their children and grandchildren, but the essence of Mabel's diner remained. And there on the wall behind the counter, under its dedicated spotlight, was the framed note from Elvis Presley. It had become a permanent fixture, an enduring piece of the diner's identity. The paper, once creamy, had mellowed to a soft ivory, and the ink seemed to have deepened with age, but Elvis's distinctive signature remained bold and clear. New customers, especially the younger ones, would still point to it, their eyes wide with curiosity. "Is that really from Elvis Presley?" they'd ask, their voices hushed with awe. And Maggie, now the owner and matriarch of the diner, would smile. She'd take a moment from flipping pancakes or stirring a pot of soup and walk over to the counter. "Yes, dear," she'd say, her voice softer, a little raspy with age, but still warm. "He came in one morning, a long, long time ago. Said he wanted a good, quiet breakfast." She'd tell the story not with the initial awe of Peterson, but with a quiet, knowing pride. She'd describe the hush that fell over the diner, Elvis's tired but kind eyes, and his simple appreciation for her hash. She'd emphasize his words, "Taste like my mama's cooking anymore." It was a bridge to a different time, a symbol of the diner's history, and a testament to the power of genuine human connection. It reminded everyone who entered that even the most famous people sometimes just yearned for a taste of home. It wasn't just a local spot. It was a pilgrimage site for Elvis fans, a destination for those seeking a piece of Americana, a slice of a story that truly happened. People came from all over, not just to see the note, but to taste the food that had earned such high praise. Maggie's hash, her fried chicken, her apple pie, they were legendary. Maggie often thought about that morning all those years ago. She still remembered the tremor in her hands, the unexpected intimacy of their conversation. She remembered the sense of validation, the feeling that her quiet dedication had been seen and acknowledged. That note wasn't just a thank you. It was a gift that had shaped her life, cementing her belief in the power of good food and kind gestures. She had learned that fame could be fleeting, but the impact of a sincere connection, a moment of true appreciation, could last forever. Elvis Presley had come seeking a simple meal, and Maggie had given him a taste of home. In return, he had given her a legacy, a story that continued to warm the hearts of everyone who stepped into Mabel's diner. One sunny morning, as she watched a young family sit in his booth, the little girl pointing excitedly at the framed note, Maggie felt a profound sense of peace. Her life had been quiet, perhaps, but it had been rich. She had found her purpose in the comforting aromas and sizzling sounds of her kitchen. She had poured her heart into her food, just as her grandmother had taught her. And in a small, unassuming diner in Harmony Creek, thanks to a simple breakfast and a grateful king, Maggie O'Malley's heartwarming cooking had truly become a taste. The note wasn't just framed on the wall, it was etched into the very soul of the diner. A constant reminder that the most enduring legacies are often built on the simplest, most heartfelt acts of kindness.